I'm excited to talk to you on LinkedIn and elsewhere in your work. I know that you work a lot through on change management problems and projects, and you speak to this quite a bit. So my first question to you is around that. Like, what is your experience on that? Just talk to me about the background around the change management. And for a little context, you sort of know what I'm doing here. I'm focusing in on experimentation program structure. Started to interview a lot of people. What I'm finding is that there's not a lot of individuals that know fully that arc of change management. You know, they come in and they experience a piece of it, but it's hard to sort of understand where it is just generally. So talk to me about your experience. We'll eventually drill down to some tactical specifics on like team structures that you've seen and work and not work and things like that. But just generally, where do you come at this concept of experimentation team structure and that term center of excellence, especially? Like, what's your viewpoint on where that fits in and how it does?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. One, I guess, change management, team structures, and center of excellence. Let's start with the first one. I think change management is anything related to change, which is basically twofold. You have higher management who change an organization, change a structure, and actually really manage it. And I guess on the CRO specialist level, you have change management tactics, which are more related to aligning with colleagues, convincing others, coping with resistance, motivating colleagues for experimentation. So it's twofold, and it depends on where you are in the organization, how big of a change management tactics and you do to make it thrive. As a CRO specialist, I was mainly aligning with colleagues, with my direct colleagues, my team, to get more freedom for my work, to get a better understanding, and to help them achieve their goals with my experiments. And now that I in center of excellences, I enter companies at a higher level as a consultant. I'm more and more working on change management from a higher perspective in the organization, to change the organization, to change the structures, and to change the way of working and mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's get detailed on there. So it's in the change management, specifically around centers of excellence. When you're
Yep.
implementing a center of excellence, you're implying a couple things. One, you're changing how things are working currently and how teams are working together.
Yep.
And two, you're usually you're moving from a centralized approach to that program, to that sometimes you have nothing and you're going 0 to 1, but normally there's a centralization in the beginning. When you go from 0 to 1, let's have some unit that's good at this thing before we start
Yep.
to spread the love, so talk to me about specifically what you see when you're working on a center of excellence implementation. And I guess I would ask you to come at it from two angles. One, team structure. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
do you see let me just start there. Team structure.
Yeah.
Like, what do you see as the core team on the center of excellence? And then how does that kind of hub and spoke down to what you might call product teams or otherwise? Talk to me about the individuals that are running the center of excellence versus the product team and what that core structure looks like.
Yeah, so I've been in several center of excellences. As we spoke before the recording, at Online Dialogue we get this question very often now to help set up center of excellences. I've been involved in a couple. The ones I work on now generally have an experienced lead, generally with someone who has a background in CRO, but has many years of experience. Preferably one or two data analysts, UX researcher, UX designer, and in our case, they work together with an agency which also has availability to different specialists. For instance, when we want to automate stuff, we use a technical web analyst and developer to set up the API connection, for instance, from the testing tool or BigQuery to Airtable to automate stuff and make it as easy as possible for the specialist. But it's generally one or two data analysts, UX researcher, and or designer, and an experienced lead with generally with a background in CRO.
Yeah, so that's all in the center of excellence, because that sounds
Yes.
like a centralized program. If you've got those
No.
those people doing tactical work like analyzing results, like maybe designer or things like that, that's kind of the tactical work that I would assume is, being passed off to those teams, and those teams are actually taking up the torch on those actually tactical pieces.
It can be twofold. When with one client, we really are guiding, coaching all the CRO specialists in the different product teams with the experience team as a center of excellence. So we don't design tests, we don't run analysis, we don't set up hypotheses. We really teach, coach, guide, give workshops, ensure a positive team spirit, make it as easy, as fun as possible for the specialists operating from the different product teams. Indeed, that's one client. Other client, it's indeed a bit of both. Mostly is guiding, helping out the CRO specialists in the product teams, but sometimes they do a little bit on the side, like the more advanced research or the more advanced analytics when the CRO specialist is, or the product team does not have sufficient time or knowledge to do it themselves.
Yeah. So let's go downstream to that sort of the spoke, right? To the product team. If you're in that engagement, in your experience where you're just guiding and you're educating, you're not at the center of the wheel in terms of execution. That execution is happening at the product team level. What's your experience of the team structure there? So there's this, you mentioned there's a CRO specialist there that you're guiding and training. Talk to me about that kind of pod structure. So, for example, Sid Bakru over at Hulu set up this optimization pods at the product level, and he's got at least functional roles, a lot of them. Like there's product, there's design, there's engineering, there's analysis. There's actually a finance role in that little product squad. Lucas over at Booking talks about it's just a 2 or 3-legged stool. Product owner and engineer, and then in the 3-legged stool there's a designer. Right. So we're talking about these functional hats that might represent people, but people might wear multiple hats.
Yeah.
In your experience, like, what's going on downstream there? What's that structure look like? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, like I've seen multiple setups and multiple center of excellence structures, and that's also multiple ways for the product team to structure itself. I generally see indeed a product owner, front-end development, back-end development, depending on the product, of course, and the designers. And sometimes there's a CRO specialist there. Sometimes there's also an analyst, and part of the product team does the experimentation. For instance, the analyst and the UX designer are then responsible for experimentation in those teams. But I also seen that the product owner is responsible for experimentation in the team when it's fully embedded there. So again, yeah, I've seen several different situations, but generally what I've seen is product owner, back end, front end, and a designer.
Yeah. So I think in my reading the tea leaves, or sort of like absorbing a lot of these conversations, I'm thinking that the structure of those product teams has a lot to do with what they're asked to do, or what they're responsible or accountable for. And that is
Absolutely.
driven by, metrics of accountability. I'm working with one program right now, for example, where at the top, at the program experimentation center of excellence, kind of the leaders there and the managers above, they're wanting, true product ownership, meaning you have metrics, you're accountable for those metrics, and you are, that product owner is responsible for getting closer to the customer, finding problems, moving the needle on those metrics, etc. But in reality, that's in theory, that's on paper, that's how it is. But in reality, they're really just handed down this roadmap of technical requirements and things to implement, and then they're effectively project managers, and they're requested to build stuff and work with the IT department to just build stuff and make sure that things are built on time, and they're not really the metric ownership. So my question there to you is where have you seen and what have you seen work on in this example when you're wanting to implement true product ownership? And maybe doesn't have to be that way. Maybe you can have just a bunch of product managers to be implementing the roadmap of what our leaders say that you should be doing. But the question is specifically around accountability metrics, goal tree maps. Like where are you seeing that come into the conversation? And what's your viewpoint there?
Yeah, it's indeed. I still see less and less, fortunately, and I'm really happy about it. But I see less and less like fully output-driven product teams, meaning release 10 features this quarter and then can get applauded by the higher management. I still occasionally see it, but less and less. What I see very, very often, of course, as mentioned, when it comes to this strategy, this maturity and experimentation, it's mainly based in the Netherlands. But I see continuous discovery habits book everywhere. I see triple diamonds everywhere, double diamonds within the product teams. And for me, that's absolutely perfect because as the experimentation specialist, CRO specialist, or those responsible for experimentation can really help with that and align with that and embed the process experimentation within the process of the product team. So I see more and more product teams finally becoming, I want to say finally, outcome driven. And that, of course, works perfectly for those responsible for experimentation or with the job to guide the product team towards more experimentation. Because if it's feature output driven, it's really tough to get experimentation of product teams because they get applauded by when they release 10 new features. And we're going to say, yes, sorry, only 25% of those features actually have a positive impact on the real KPIs you should be measuring. So the other 75% you shouldn't release it, and then they'll miss their end of the year bonus. So it really is, it really works much, much better if it is truly outcome driven. And so then again, it also means that a center of excellence is definitely not the holy grail. It's just another step in experimentation maturity for me. Because one part of the company could say, yeah, we should have a center of excellence and have more product teams experiment to have better outcomes. But then if the product team is not fully outcome driven, that's another step to take. The center of excellence can move a lot of levers and a lot of better tooling, better teams, better structure, higher quality testing. But it's not like the highest end. It's not the holy grail. It is an important step to get to an experimentation culture, but you're not there when you have a center of excellence. There are much, much more things to take into account.
Yeah, I remember at Sid over at Hulu talked about that specifically. Like they implemented the center of excellence, but 2 years past, they don't talk about that at all, right? It's just happening. The standards, the governance is in place, and it just happens. And yeah, cool. My last question for you, Ruben, here, getting quite tactical. What are the tools that you see helpful on this journey? With regards to this conversation, right? Implementing centers of excellence, getting, empowering those teams to run kind of the double, triple diamond stuff on their own and everything like that. And what are the tools, artifacts, rituals, anything that sticks out that is like particularly handy and helpful that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So that's a good question. For tooling, of course, when we get to the basics, automate as much as possible, especially in the beginning when people have to start running experiments in product teams. There's a lot of things they have to consider. There's a lot of extra work. They have to learn a lot. So make it as easy as possible. And of course, automation is there, absolutely crucial. So automate whatever you can. But what I also find extremely important is when a decision comes, we have a center of excellence and product teams have to experiment, and there are 1 or 2 people responsible on those product teams for the experimentation. You want those responsible to form a team as well, even though they have different manager, there are different positions within the organizations. So set up tooling that they can easily give each other feedback, like a Slack review channel, for instance. Set up recurring meetings, celebrate successes together, make it a team. I think that's absolutely, and whatever tooling or rituals you can get there, I think that's vital, especially in the beginning, because that only creates a safe environment for those people to learn, to experiment themselves, and to have a higher quality based on feedback and learning together. So there's a lot to consider. Yeah.
Yeah,
That I
nice.
think is
Yeah,
an important feature.
yeah, that's a good list of stuff on on your point around automation. I I'll not push back on you, but like that's an interesting one I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially in the beginning. Have you read the new Elon book biography by Walter Isaacson?
No, it's on my list, but
I
I haven't read it
recommend
yet.
it. And in the book, Elon does I mean, he's crazy. The book's fantastic in the sense of it's like a page turner, like fiction novel.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting in what he's doing to bring together different disciplines. Like he'll put designers and engineer on the assembly line, like
Yeah,
literally put their offices like right on the assembly
yeah,
line so they feel the pain, just like what we're trying to do,
yeah,
bringing those disciplines
yeah,
together and things like
yeah.
that. But there's a big story in the book about how he de-automates. Actually, he rips out automation very
Mm-hmm.
consciously at some point to get to speed and velocity. And so I don't know if there's a learning there or not for what we do, but there are some parallels at the very least for, in principle, the principle of what he's trying to do, bringing these disciplines together, increase efficiency, increase output speed and velocity. Um, and then his learning around automation on how it really only works at the very end of your um, sort of the story. Once you've really figured out your process and your flywheel, like you really need to nail it and then you automate is kind of the lesson I got from that book. And in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out your process and build that process, the automation can actually backfire. But I don't think it
Yeah, yeah.
applies everywhere. I mean, I just, I think you're right. I mean, we automate a ton. We love automation, and there's some pieces for it. But
No, I think especially recurring work and safeguards. But I'll definitely check it out. This book sounds very interesting. With recurring work and safeguards, I think it only makes it easier and
yeah,
probably more fun, because who finds it fun to type data from BigQuery into Airtable, for instance, and then
yeah,
again create a nice Google slide from it?
yeah.
No one finds that fun,
No, no, no.
and it only costs a lot of time. But one other thing
Yeah,
that came to mind regarding tooling, which is a challenge when you move from like the CRO specialist, the silo, towards the product teams, is that the product teams have to start experimenting or get to a higher quality, but they already have their tools. Um, for instance, for one client, we're building opportunity solution trees, which is absolutely perfect because we move CRO into the product teams and they start with that, which is perfect to match with CRO, but they don't work in Airtable. And I'm not going to force the product team to work in Airtable just because the designer and analyst who are responsible for experimentation do so. So in that case, what we do, we set up a Miro board, which they're used to work in, and we sync the Miro board into Airtable, where the experimentation specialist can then link the solutions and assumption testing and see what gets proven often. So when regarding tooling and regarding the process, do check what process and toolings are already in place, because you want to align. You don't want to come into the product team like, from today we're going to experiment and you have a whole new set of tools
yeah,
and we're going to
yeah,
completely change your process. Now you want to align and embed and also try to use their tools if applicable to experimentation.
yeah. At least in the beginning,
Yeah,
before you're
otherwise you might
like,
get a sport. Otherwise you'd just be an annoying person.
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, cool. Thanks, Ruben. This is great. We're getting close to 20 minutes, which is my artificial cap that I put on myself on these conversations.
Perfect.
But yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Could talk for days, but thanks. Great conversation.